The frozen wind cut through her like 1,000 knives as Lily Lancaster stumbled along the trail, her hands clutching her swollen belly while blood stained the snow beneath her feet. She had been traveling from Santa Fe to Fort Bowie, Arizona, with a wagon train that promised safe passage through the treacherous winter mountains. But when her labor pains started 3 weeks early, the wagon master had made his decision with cold practicality. They could not wait, could not risk the lives of 40 souls for one woman and her unborn child. Her husband had died 6 months prior in a mining accident, and without his protection or coin to sway the wagon master's judgment, Lily found herself abandoned on a narrow mountain pass with nothing but the clothes on her back, a thin blanket, and the terrifying knowledge that her baby was coming whether she was ready or not. The year was 1881, and the Arizona Territory showed no mercy to those who found themselves alone in its vast wilderness, especially not in the dead of winter when the mountain passes turned into frozen death traps that claimed lives with ruthless efficiency. She collapsed behind a cluster of rocks that provided minimal shelter from the howling wind, her body racked with contractions that came faster and harder with each passing minute. Lily had witnessed births before, had even helped her sister deliver twins back in Missouri, but nothing could have prepared her for the overwhelming terror of facing this moment alone on a frozen mountainside with darkness falling and wolves howling in the distance. Her fingers trembled as she tried to arrange the thin blanket beneath her, knowing it would provide little protection from the frozen ground, but having no other choice. The pain consumed her, waves of agony that stole her breath and made her cry out into the empty wilderness, her voice swallowed by the wind before it could travel more than a few feet. Hours passed in a blur of suffering and determination. Lily pulled her skirts up with shaking hands, her body working on instinct as she pushed and screamed and prayed to a God who seemed to have forgotten her existence. The cold seeped into her bones, making every movement feel like dragging herself through molasses, but she could not stop, could not give up, because her baby deserved a chance at life, even if the world had turned its back on them both. When the final push came, when she felt her child slide free from her body in a rush of blood and fluid that steamed in the frigid air, Lily reached down with the last of her strength and pulled the tiny, slippery form onto her chest. The baby did not cry at first, and terror seized Lily's heart with icy fingers. She rubbed the infant's back frantically, clearing mucus from the tiny nose and mouth with her numb fingers, whispering desperate pleas for the child to breathe, to live, to fight as hard as she had fought to bring this life into the world. Then, like a miracle, a thin wail pierced the night air, weak but unmistakably alive. Tears streamed down Lily's face as she clutched her son to her chest, wrapping him in her shawl and holding him against her skin, trying to share what little warmth remained in her body. She managed to tie off the cord with a strip torn from her petticoat, her fingers clumsy and uncoordinated from cold and exhaustion. The afterbirth came, and she kicked snow over it with the last of her energy before collapsing back against the rocks, her baby tucked inside her coat against her bare skin. Lily knew she was dying. She could feel it in the way her limbs had stopped shivering, in the heavy drowsiness that pulled at her consciousness, despite her desperate need to stay awake. But she kept her arms wrapped tight around her son, kept whispering to him that she loved him, that she was sorry, that she hoped someone would find him before it was too late. The stars wheeled overhead, impossibly bright in the clear mountain air, and Lily drifted in and out of consciousness, her mind wandering between memories of her husband's laugh and visions of her son growing up without ever knowing his mother's face. She thought about the injustice of it all, how her husband had broken his back working in silver mines to earn enough money for their journey west, only to die crushed beneath falling timber when the mine shaft collapsed. She thought about how the wagon master had looked through her as if she were already a ghost when he told her they were leaving at first light with or without her. She thought about all the ways the world ground down women who had no man to protect them, no money to buy mercy, no voice loud enough to demand basic human decency. But mostly, as the cold claimed more of her body inch by inch, Lily thought about her son and prayed with everything she had left that someone, anyone would come down this trail before morning. Samuel Brooks had been riding for 3 days straight, pushing his horse harder than he should have, but driven by an urgency he could not quite explain. He was a cowboy by trade, though that word encompassed far more than most people understood. At 26 years old, Samuel had spent the better part of his life working cattle drives, breaking horses, and taking whatever honest work came his way in the vast expanse of the Arizona Territory. He was heading toward Fort Bowie with news for the garrison commander about Apache movements in the southern mountains, information he had gathered while working as a scout for a rancher near the Mexican border. The fort paid well for reliable intelligence, and Samuel had a reputation for being both reliable and honest in a land where those qualities were rarer than gold. His horse, a sturdy buckskin gelding named Copper, picked his way carefully along the frozen trail as dawn broke over the mountains in shades of pink and gold. Samuel had his coat collar turned up against the bitter cold, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air, and he was thinking about the hot coffee and warm meal waiting for him at Fort Bowie when Copper suddenly stopped, ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring. "What is it, boy?" Samuel asked, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle secured to his saddle. In this country, anything unusual could mean danger, whether from wild animals, hostile raiders, or simple misfortune that could kill a man just as dead. Copper took a few hesitant steps forward, then stopped again, whinnying softly. Samuel dismounted and led the horse forward on foot, his eyes scanning the trail ahead for whatever had spooked his usually steady mount. Then he saw it, a splash of color against the white snow, partially hidden behind a cluster of rocks just off the main trail. His heart began to pound as he approached, his mind racing through possibilities, none of them good. What he found stole the breath from his lungs. A woman lay motionless in the snow, her dark hair spread around her head like a halo, her skin pale as death except for the blue tinge around her lips. But it was what she held clutched to her chest that made Samuel drop to his knees beside her, a baby, wrapped in a blood-stained shawl, tucked inside her coat against her body. "God Almighty!" Samuel breathed, his hands already moving to check for signs of life. He pressed 2 fingers against the woman's throat, searching for a pulse, and nearly shouted with relief when he felt a faint, thready beat beneath her icy skin. The baby was harder to check without disturbing him, but when Samuel carefully peeled back a corner of the shawl, he saw the tiny chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. They were alive, but barely, and they would not stay that way much longer without immediate intervention. Samuel's mind raced as he assessed the situation. The woman had clearly given birth recently, probably last night based on the blood and the condition of both mother and child. She had been abandoned or lost, left to die in the cold, and it was nothing short of a miracle that she had managed to keep herself and the baby alive this long. But miracles only went so far in the Arizona winter, and if Samuel did not act fast, this would become a tragedy instead of a rescue. He ran back to Copper and pulled a bundle from his saddlebags, a thick wool blanket he had been saving for cold nights on the trail. Samuel had been a cowboy long enough to know that survival often came down to the supplies you carried and the decisions you made in critical moments. He spread the blanket on the ground next to the woman, then carefully, gently, he lifted her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, her body limp and unresponsive, but her arms were locked tight around the baby even in unconsciousness, a mother's final act of protection. Samuel wrapped both mother and child in the blanket, then lifted them together and carried them to his horse. Getting them both into the saddle was a challenge, but Samuel had loaded plenty of injured calves and unconscious cowboys onto horses over the years, and he managed to position the woman across the saddle, her baby still clutched to her chest. He swung up behind them, holding them both secure with one arm while guiding Copper with the other. "Easy, boy," he murmured to his horse. "We need to get them warm. Fast." Samuel knew the terrain well enough to remember a line shack about 2 miles back the way he had come. It was a crude shelter that ranchers used during cattle drives. Nothing fancy, but it would have 4 walls and a roof, and most importantly, It would have a stove if he remembered correctly. He turned Copper around and urged the horse into a faster pace, every minute counting now. The ride felt like it took hours, though it could not have been more than 20 minutes. Samuel kept checking the woman's breathing, kept making sure the baby was still moving, his own heart pounding with an urgency he had never felt before. He had saved men's lives before, had pulled cowboys from stampedes, and dragged wounded soldiers from Apache raids, but something about this woman and her baby struck him differently, touched something deep in his chest that he could not quite name. When the line shack finally came into view, Samuel nearly wept with relief. He dismounted awkwardly, careful not to jostle his precious cargo, and kicked the door open. The interior was dark and cold, but it was shelter, and that was what mattered. He laid the woman and baby on the floor, still wrapped in his blanket, then moved with practiced efficiency. First, he got a fire going in the small iron stove, using kindling from a box by the door and coaxing the flames to life with steady breaths. The line shack might be abandoned for the winter, but cowboys were good about leaving supplies for the next person who might need them. Once the fire was crackling, Samuel filled a pot with snow and set it on the stove to melt. Then he turned his attention back to the woman and child. He unwrapped them carefully, checking their condition in the growing firelight. The woman's lips were no longer blue, which he took as a good sign, but her skin was still dangerously cold to the touch. The baby, miraculously, seemed to be in better condition, probably because his mother had given him every ounce of warmth she had left in her body. Samuel found a relatively clean blanket in the corner of the shack and wrapped the infant in it, then placed him in a wooden crate padded with another blanket near the stove, close enough to benefit from the warmth, but not so close as to be dangerous. Then he turned his full attention to the mother. Samuel had seen enough cases of exposure to know what needed to be done, though his hands hesitated for a moment, aware of the impropriety of what he was about to do. But propriety was a luxury for people who were not dying, and this woman needed warming now, or she would not survive the hour. He stripped away her wet, blood-stained clothes with as much respect as he could manage, trying not to look at anything except what was medically necessary. Her body was covered in bruises and cuts, evidence of a hard journey and harder labor. Samuel grabbed his own spare clothes from his saddlebags and dressed her in his flannel shirt and woolen undershirt, both far too large but dry and warm. He wrapped her in every blanket and coat he could find in the shack, then positioned her on a bedroll close to the stove. The water had melted and begun to steam, so Samuel found a relatively clean cup and carefully dripped small amounts of warm water between the woman's lips, massaging her throat to encourage her to swallow. Most of it dribbled out, but some went down, and that was progress. He kept at it, patient and persistent, while the baby slept in his makeshift cradle and the fire crackled in the stove. Hours passed. Samuel checked on both his patients regularly, adding more water to the pot, keeping the fire fed, making sure the baby stayed warm and the woman kept breathing. He found some jerky in his pack and chewed it mechanically, not really tasting it, his attention focused entirely on the woman whose name he did not know, but whose life had somehow become his responsibility. It was late afternoon when she finally stirred. Her eyelids fluttered, and a soft moan escaped her lips. Samuel was at her side immediately, kneeling beside her. "Easy now," he said softly. "You are safe. You and your baby are both safe." Her eyes opened, unfocused at first, then widening with sudden panic. "My baby," she gasped, trying to sit up. "Where is my baby?" "Right here, right here," Samuel assured her, moving quickly to bring the crate closer so she could see the sleeping infant. "He is fine, just sleeping. You did good. Kept him alive through the night." Lily's eyes filled with tears as she looked at her son, then up at Samuel. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice hoarse and broken. "Samuel Brooks," he said. "I am a cowboy, was heading to Fort Bowie when I found you both on the trail. I brought you to this line shack to get you warm." "I thought we were going to die," Lily said, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I would never see morning and my baby would freeze and nobody would ever know we existed." "You are alive," Samuel said firmly. Both of you are alive, and I am going to make sure you stay that way. Lily tried to speak again, but exhaustion pulled her back under, her eyes closing as sleep claimed her once more. Samuel let her rest, checking her pulse and breathing, satisfied that both were stronger than they had been that morning. He returned to his vigil, keeping the fire burning, keeping watch over this woman and child who had stumbled into his life with all the force of a rock slide. Over the next 3 days, Samuel nursed Lily and her baby back from the brink of death. He learned her name during one of her more lucid moments, learned about her husband who had died in the mines, about the wagon train that had abandoned her, about her desperate hope to reach Fort Bowie where she had a cousin who might take her in. Samuel listened to her story and felt rage kindle in his chest at the injustice of it all, at the cruelty of people who would leave a pregnant woman to die rather than show even basic human decency. But he kept his anger locked away, showing Lily only gentle competence as he helped her regain her strength. He found food in his packs and in the line shack's supplies, making thin soups and broths that Lily could keep down. He boiled water and helped her clean herself as much as modesty allowed, turning his back when necessary and treating her with the respect she deserved. And when the baby cried with hunger and Lily struggled to nurse him, weak as she was, Samuel stayed nearby but gave them privacy, busying himself with chores around the shack. On the 4th day, Lily was finally strong enough to sit up on her own, her son nursing hungrily at her breast while she leaned against the wall near the stove. Samuel was cooking a proper meal for the first time, beans and salt pork that smelled like heaven in the close confines of the shack. "You saved our lives," Lily said suddenly, her voice stronger than it had been. "I do not know how to thank you for that." Samuel stirred the pot, not turning around. "No thanks necessary. Any decent person would have done the same." "That is not true, and you know it," Lily said quietly. "The wagon master did not think we were worth saving. The other families did not speak up for us. But you, a stranger, you gave us everything. Your clothes, your food, your time. You could have been at Fort Bowie days ago, but instead you stayed here with us." Samuel finally turned to face her, and their eyes met across the small space of the shack. Something passed between them in that moment, something neither of them could quite name, but both of them felt. Lily saw a man with kind brown eyes and a weathered face, someone who had shown her more compassion in 4 days than most people had shown her in a lifetime. Samuel saw a woman with fierce determination in her gaze, someone who had fought death itself to protect her child and won through sheer force of will. "What will you do when we reach Fort Bowie?" Samuel asked, breaking the silence. "Find my cousin if she is still there," Lily said. "Her name is Margaret, and she married a soldier stationed at the fort 2 years ago. I have not heard from her since, but I have nowhere else to go." "And if she's not there?" Lily looked down at her son, stroking his soft hair with one finger. "Then I will figure something out. I always do." Samuel nodded, respecting her strength even as worry gnawed at him. The Arizona Territory was not kind to women alone, especially women with infants and no means of support. But he did not voice his concerns. Not yet. There would be time enough to face those challenges when they arose. That evening, after they had eaten and the baby was sleeping again, Lily asked Samuel about his life. He told her about growing up on a ranch in Texas, about losing his parents to fever when he was 16, about drifting west in search of work and adventure. He told her about the cattle drives and the hard winters, about learning to read the land and the weather, about the strange satisfaction of honest work done well. "Do you ever get lonely?" Lily asked softly. "Riding alone all the time, no family, no home to speak of?" Samuel considered the question, poking at the fire with a stick. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But loneliness is part of the cowboy life. You learn to live with it." "That sounds sad," Lily said. "Maybe," Samuel agreed, "but it is also freedom. Nobody telling you what to do or where to go. Just you and the sky and the road ahead." "I used to want freedom like that," Lily said, a wistful note in her voice. Before I met my husband, I dreamed of being one of those women who wore trousers and rode horses and did not care what anyone thought. But then I fell in love and I wanted different things: a home, a family, stability. And now? Samuel asked. Lily looked at her sleeping son. Now I just want him to be safe and happy. Everything else is secondary. They talked late into the night, sharing stories and dreams, and Samuel found himself opening up to this woman in ways he never had with anyone else. There was something about Lily that made him want to be honest, want to share the parts of himself he usually kept locked away. And Lily, for her part, felt something warming inside her chest that had nothing to do with the fire in the stove. Samuel made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since her husband died, made her feel like maybe the world was not entirely made of cold cruelty after all. On the fifth day, Samuel declared Lily strong enough to travel. He had been worried about moving her too soon, but they were running low on food and the weather was holding clear, which might not last. He fashioned a carrier for the baby using a blanket and some rope, creating a sling that Lily could wear across her chest to keep her hands free. Then he helped her onto Copper, settling her in front of him so he could hold both her and the reins. The ride to Fort Bowie took 2 more days. Samuel kept their pace slow and steady, stopping frequently to let Lily rest and nurse the baby. They camped one night in a small canyon where the rocks blocked the wind, and Samuel showed Lily how to read the stars for navigation, pointing out constellations and telling her the stories cowboys told about them. You are a good teacher, Lily said, lying on her back next to the fire while Samuel held the baby, giving her a break from the constant weight. My father taught me, Samuel said, rocking the infant gently. He said a man who could not read the stars was lost even on familiar ground. Your father sounds like he was a wise man. He was, Samuel agreed. I miss him every day. Lily was quiet for a moment, then said, What is it like holding him? Samuel looked down at the baby in his arms, so small and fragile and perfect. It is terrifying, he admitted, like holding something precious and breakable, and knowing if you make one wrong move, you could ruin everything. But also, it is wonderful. I never held a baby before. You are natural at it, Lily said softly. He likes you. He does not fuss when you hold him. Samuel felt something warm bloom in his chest at her words, a feeling he could not quite identify, but that made him want to do everything in his power to protect this woman and her child. They reached Fort Bowie late in the afternoon of the 7th day since Samuel had found Lily on the trail. The fort was a sprawling complex of adobe buildings surrounded by a wooden palisade, home to several companies of cavalry and their support staff. Samuel rode through the main gate and headed straight for the commander's office, but first he needed to help Lily find her cousin. The post sutler directed them to the married soldiers' quarters, a row of small adobe houses where families lived. Samuel helped Lily down from Copper and walked with her to the door, marked with the name Carson, her cousin's married name. Lily knocked, her heart pounding with anxiety and hope in equal measure. The woman who opened the door was in her 30s, with graying hair and a kind face that looked tired but content. Her eyes widened when she saw Lily. Lily? She gasped. Lily Lancaster? Lord above, we heard you were dead. Margaret, Lily said, her voice breaking. I made it. I made it to Fort Bowie. The two women embraced, both crying, while Samuel stood back and held Lily's baby, feeling suddenly like an intruder on a private moment. But when Lily pulled back and turned to introduce him, the look in her eyes made his heart skip a beat. Margaret, this is Samuel Brooks, Lily said. He saved my life and my son's life. Without him, we would have frozen to death on the mountain pass. Margaret's eyes filled with gratitude as she looked at Samuel. Then you have our eternal thanks, Mr. Brooks. Please come inside, both of you. You must tell me everything. They spent the evening in Margaret's small but comfortable home, sharing the story of what had happened. Margaret was horrified to hear about the wagon train abandoning Lily, and she cried when Lily described giving birth alone in the snow. But she also smiled through her tears when she heard how Samuel had found them and nursed them back to health. "You are an angel, Mr. Brooks," Margaret said firmly. "Not many men would have done what you did." Samuel shifted uncomfortably, not used to such effusive praise. "I just did what anyone decent would do." "No," Margaret said just as firmly. "You did what a good man does. There is a difference." As the evening wore on and Margaret's husband returned from his duties, Samuel found himself reluctant to leave. He told himself it was just concern for Lily and the baby, wanting to make sure they were truly settled before he went about his own business. But if he was honest with himself, it was more than that. In the weeks since he had found Lily on that frozen trail, something had changed inside him. The loneliness he had always accepted as part of his life suddenly felt less like freedom and more like empty space crying out to be filled. When he finally took his leave, promising to return the next day to check on them, Lily walked him to the door. "Thank you," she said softly, her hand briefly touching his arm. "For everything." "You are welcome," Samuel said, then hesitated. "Lily, I want you to know if you need anything at all, you can find me. I am going to be in Fort Bowie for a few days at least, and even after I leave, I can be reached through the fort. I do contract work for them regular." "I will remember that," Lily said, and the warmth in her voice made Samuel's heart race. He touched his hat brim and walked away into the darkness, leading Copper toward the fort stable. But his mind stayed fixed on the woman he had left behind. Over the next week, Samuel found excuses to visit Margaret's house every day. He told himself he was just checking on Lily's recovery, making sure the baby was thriving, but the truth was simpler and more complicated at once. He wanted to see her. He wanted to hear her voice, see her smile, watch her with her son, and feel that strange warmth in his chest that had become addictive. Lily, for her part, found herself watching for Samuel's visits, her heart lifting when she heard his distinctive knock on the door. She told herself it was just gratitude, just the natural affection one felt for someone who had saved their life. But late at night, when she lay in the small room Margaret had given her, the baby sleeping in a cradle beside her bed, Lily let herself admit the truth. She was falling in love with Samuel Brooks. It seemed impossible. Her husband had been dead only 6 months. She had a newborn son to care for. Samuel was a drifter, a cowboy with no permanent home and no interest in settling down. Everything about the situation was impractical and inappropriate and doomed to heartbreak. But the heart, Lily was learning, did not care much for practical considerations. On the 8th day of his stay at Fort Bowie, Samuel finally completed his business with the fort commander and received payment for his scouting information. He should have left that afternoon, should have climbed on Copper and ridden away to the next job, the next town, the next adventure. But instead, he found himself standing outside Margaret's house, his heart pounding like he was facing down a grizzly bear instead of a simple door. Margaret answered his knock with a knowing smile. "She is out back," she said, without preamble, "hanging laundry and letting the baby get some sun." Samuel nodded his thanks and walked around the side of the house to the small yard behind it. Lily was there, pinning one of the baby's tiny garments to a clothesline while the infant lay on a blanket nearby, waving his fists at the sky. She turned when she heard Samuel's footsteps, and the smile that lit her face made his breath catch. "Samuel," she said, "I did not expect you today. I thought you would be leaving Fort Bowie." "I should be," Samuel admitted, walking closer. "I finished my business with the commander yesterday, but I could not leave without saying goodbye properly." Something flickered in Lily's eyes, something that might have been disappointment or sadness. "I understand," she said quietly. "You have your own life to live. You have already done more for us than anyone could expect." "Lily," Samuel said, and then stopped, unsure how to continue. He had faced down stampeding cattle and hostile raiders and killing winters, But this moment felt more terrifying than all of them combined. I need to tell you something. Lily set down the laundry basket and turned to face him fully, her expression open and waiting. Samuel took a deep breath and dove in. I have been a cowboy for 10 years now. I have ridden from Texas to California and everywhere in between. I have never stayed in one place longer than a season, never wanted to. The freedom of the trail, the open sky, that was always enough for me. But then I found you on that mountain pass, and something changed. These past 2 weeks, getting to know you, watching you with your son, talking with you about everything and nothing, I realized something. I realized I have been lonely without even knowing it. I realized freedom is not worth much if you have nobody to share it with. Lily's eyes were wide, her hand pressed to her chest as if to still her racing heart. I do not have much to offer, Samuel continued, the words tumbling out now. I do not own land or have a house or even a steady job beyond whatever work I can find. But I have 2 strong hands and a willing heart, and I would use both to take care of you and your son if you would let me. I know it is too soon. I know you are still mourning your husband. I know I have no right to ask this, but Lily, I think I am falling in love with you, and I had to tell you before I lost my nerve. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the baby's soft gurgles and the distant sounds of fort life. Lily stared at Samuel, tears welling in her eyes, and for a horrible moment he thought he had made a terrible mistake. Then she stepped forward and took his hands in hers. You are right that it is too soon, she said softly. I loved my husband, and his death still hurts. But Samuel, he has been gone for months now, and I have had to keep living, keep surviving, keep fighting for our baby. And in these past 2 weeks, you have shown me what it means to be truly cared for, not out of duty or obligation, but out of genuine kindness. I find myself thinking about you constantly. I find myself hoping you will visit, feeling disappointed when you leave, imagining what it would be like if you stayed. Is that a yes? Samuel asked, hardly daring to hope. It is a maybe, Lily said, a small smile playing at her lips. It is a let us take this slowly and see where it goes. It is a I want to know you better, see if what we are feeling is real or just the intensity of what we went through together. Can you accept that? Samuel felt like his heart might burst from his chest. Yes, he said fervently. Yes, I can accept that. I will wait as long as you need, Lily. I will prove to you that I am serious about this. Then prove it, Lily said. Stay in Fort Bowie. Find work here. Spend time with us. Let us get to know each other properly. If in a few months we both still feel this way, then we can talk about the future. Samuel did not hesitate. I will find work today, he promised. The fort always needs scouts and horse breakers. I will make this work, Lily. I swear it. She smiled at him, a full, genuine smile that made her entire face light up, and Samuel thought he had never seen anything more beautiful in his life. On impulse, he lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently, a gesture of respect and promise. Lily's breath hitched, and she squeezed his fingers before stepping back. Go find that work, she said, her voice slightly breathless, and then come tell me all about it. Samuel left feeling like he could fly without wings. He went immediately to the fort commander and inquired about longer-term employment. The commander, a grizzled veteran named Captain Morrison, studied Samuel with shrewd eyes. I heard you were the one who saved that Lancaster woman and her baby, Morrison said. That true? Yes, sir, Samuel confirmed. Good work, Morrison said gruffly. Takes a special kind of man to stop and help instead of riding by. We need men like that. I can offer you a position as a civilian scout attached to the garrison. Pay is decent, quarters are provided, and the work is steady if not always safe. Interested? Very interested, sir, Samuel said. Then you are hired, Morrison said, extending his hand. Report to Sergeant Williams tomorrow morning to get your assignment. Samuel shook the commander's hand, hardly believing his luck. In the space of a single conversation, he had gone from drifting cowboy to steadily employed scout with a place to live and a reason to stay. He wanted to run back to Lily immediately and tell her the news, but instead, he forced himself to wait until the next day, wanting to show up with everything official and settled. The months that followed were some of the happiest of Samuel's life. He settled into his work as a scout, riding patrols along the Mexican border and tracking Apache movements for the garrison. The work was familiar and satisfying, using skills he had honed over years of reading trails and understanding the land. When he was not working, he spent every possible moment with Lily and her son. The baby, whom Lily had named Thomas after her late husband, grew strong and healthy. Samuel found himself becoming deeply attached to the little boy, holding him during visits, making him laugh with silly faces, teaching him to recognize Copper's distinctive whinny. Lily watched these interactions with warmth in her eyes, seeing Samuel's genuine affection for her son and loving him more for it. As spring arrived and the desert bloomed with unexpected color, Samuel and Lily's relationship deepened. They took long walks around the fort, talking about everything from philosophy to practical matters like how to fix a broken wagon wheel. Samuel introduced Lily to some of the other scouts and their families, and Lily found herself building a community in Fort Bowie, something she had never really had before. Margaret watched it all with satisfaction, happy to see her cousin healing and finding joy again. She encouraged the relationship, often volunteering to watch Thomas so Samuel and Lily could have time alone together. On one such evening, Samuel took Lily up to a hill overlooking the fort, where they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. "I never thanked you properly for what you did," Lily said, leaning against Samuel's side as they sat on the hillside. "You gave me back my life, Samuel. You gave Thomas a chance to grow up. How do I ever repay something like that?" "You do not have to repay anything," Samuel said, his arm around her shoulders. "But if you want to thank me, you can tell me what you are thinking right now, in this moment." Lily was quiet for a long time, watching the colors fade from the sky. Then she said, "I am thinking that I am happy, for the first time since Thomas died, since even before that really, I am genuinely happy, and I am thinking that it is because of you." Samuel's heart swelled. "I am happy too," he said softly, "happier than I have ever been. I did not know I was missing this until I found you." Lily turned to look at him, her face serious in the fading light. "Samuel, I need to tell you something. I have been holding back, trying to be careful, trying not to rush into anything. But the truth is, I love you. I am in love with you. I think I have been since those days in the line shack when you took care of us so gently. And I am tired of pretending I need more time to be sure." Samuel's breath caught. "Lily." "I know it has only been 4 months since you found us," Lily continued. "I know people will say it is too soon, that I am not properly mourning my first husband. But Samuel, I cannot keep pretending my heart is not already yours. I loved Thomas, I did, but he is gone. You are here. And life is too short and too uncertain to waste time being careful when you have found something real." Samuel cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. "I love you too," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I love you, and I love that little boy. And I want to spend the rest of my life proving it to you. Marry me, Lily. Let me be a father to Thomas, and a husband to you. Let me give you the life you deserve." "Yes," Lily breathed, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Samuel, I will marry you." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. It was Lily's first kiss since her husband died, and Samuel's first kiss that meant something deeper than passing affection. They held each other on that hillside until full darkness fell and the stars came out, making promises and plans for a future neither of them had dared to hope for just months before. They were married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the Fort Chapel. Lily wore a dress borrowed from Margaret, pale blue cotton that brought out her eyes. Samuel wore his best clothes, clean and pressed, his hair neatly trimmed for the occasion. Thomas, now 7 months old, attended in Margaret's arms, gurgling happily throughout the ceremony. Captain Morrison gave Lily away, a gesture that brought tears to her eyes since she had no family besides Margaret in attendance. The fort chaplain performed the service, and the small congregation consisted mostly of soldiers and their wives who had come to respect both Samuel and Lily during their time at Fort Bowie. When Samuel slipped a simple gold band onto Lily's finger, a ring he had saved 3 months' pay to buy, she looked at him with such love that he felt his throat tighten with emotion. I promise to love you and care for you and Thomas for the rest of my days, Samuel said, deviating from the traditional vows. I promise to be the man you deserve, the father your son deserves. I promise to build us a life worth living. I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, Lily responded, her voice strong despite her tears. I promise to love you with everything I am. I promise to make you happy, Samuel, because you have made me happier than I ever thought possible again. The chaplain pronounced them husband and wife, and when Samuel kissed his bride, the small congregation erupted in cheers and applause. It was a simple wedding, nothing fancy or elaborate, but it was perfect because it was real and heartfelt and built on a foundation of genuine love. The fort commander had given them a small house in the married quarters, 2 rooms and a kitchen, humble but infinitely precious to Samuel and Lily, who had both known what it meant to have nothing. They spent their wedding night there, with Thomas sleeping in his cradle in the corner while Samuel and Lily discovered each other as husband and wife. It was tender and passionate and filled with whispered words of love, a physical expression of the emotional bond they had forged through hardship and healing. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm after that. Samuel continued his work as a scout while Lily made their small house into a home. She took in sewing and laundry from other soldiers to earn extra money, determined to contribute to their household. Samuel protested at first, wanting to provide for his family, but Lily insisted. We are partners, she told him firmly. That means we both contribute in whatever ways we can. Besides, I like having my own money. It makes me feel independent. Samuel understood that need, respected it even, so he stopped arguing and instead just made sure she did not work so hard that she exhausted herself. He helped with Thomas when he was home, changing diapers and giving bottles and rocking the baby to sleep while singing old cowboy songs in a surprisingly pleasant baritone. Lily would watch him with their son and fall in love with him all over again, amazed at how naturally he had taken to fatherhood. Thomas's first word was "Dada," directed at Samuel with perfect clarity one evening in August. Samuel had looked at Lily with tears in his eyes, overwhelmed by the simple acceptance the little boy showed him. He knows you are his father, Lily said softly, touching Samuel's arm. In every way that matters, you are his father. Thomas does not remember anyone else. I will never let him down, Samuel vowed. I will be the best father I know how to be. You already are, Lily assured him. The first year of their marriage passed in a blur of work and family and deepening love. Samuel and Lily navigated the challenges of merging their lives with patience and communication, learning each other's habits and preferences, sometimes arguing but always making up. They made friends at the fort, attended dances and socials, and built a life that felt secure and happy. When Lily discovered she was pregnant again in the spring of 1882, just over a year after their wedding, she was filled with mixed emotions. She was happy, certainly, wanting to give Samuel a biological child of his own. But she also worried about going through childbirth again, memories of that frozen trail still haunting her nightmares sometimes. Samuel held her when she told him, his face lighting up with joy before clouding with concern. Are you happy about this? He asked carefully. After what you went through with Thomas, I would understand if you were scared. I am scared, Lily admitted. But I am also happy. I want this baby, Samuel. I want to give you a child, want Thomas to have a brother or sister. And this time I will not be alone. I will have a doctor and a warm bed, and you beside me. That makes all the difference. I will be right there with you, Samuel promised. every step of the way. You will not face this alone. He kept that promise. As Lily's belly grew round with their child, Samuel doted on her, making sure she ate well and rested enough, rubbing her aching back and swollen feet at the end of long days. He read to her from the few books they owned, made her laugh with stories from his scouting expeditions, and held her when fear crept up on her in the dark hours of night. Margaret helped too, sharing her own experiences with pregnancy and childbirth, giving practical advice and emotional support. The community of women at Fort Bowie rallied around Lily, this young mother who had survived such a terrible ordeal, and Lily felt the warmth of genuine friendship in a way she never had before. Thomas, now a toddler walking on sturdy legs, seemed fascinated by his mother's growing belly. Lily would let him put his little hand on her stomach and feel the baby kick, and his delighted giggles made both Samuel and Lily smile. "Baby," Thomas would say, patting Lily's belly gently. "My baby." "Your brother or sister," Lily would correct gently. "You are going to be a big brother, Thomas. You will have to help Mama and Daddy take care of the new baby." Thomas would nod seriously, as if he understood the gravity of this responsibility, and Samuel would ruffle his hair with pride. Lily went into labor on a cold November night, exactly 2 years after Samuel had found her on that frozen trail. The irony was not lost on either of them as Samuel held Lily's hand and she labored in their warm, safe home with the fort doctor in attendance and Margaret providing support and encouragement. This birth was nothing like Thomas's. There was pain, certainly, but there was also help and comfort in the security of knowing she would survive this, her baby would survive this, that everything would be all right. When Lily finally pushed her daughter into the world, the relief and joy were overwhelming. "A girl," the doctor announced, placing the squalling infant on Lily's chest. "Healthy lungs on this one?" Samuel was crying unashamedly as he looked at his daughter, this tiny person he had helped create, the living proof of his love for Lily. "She is perfect," he whispered, kissing Lily's sweaty forehead. "You are perfect. Thank you, Lily. Thank you for this gift." They named their daughter Sarah Rose Brooks, and she had Samuel's brown eyes and Lily's dark hair. Thomas was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything from diaper changes to feeding, and Samuel and Lily's hearts swelled watching their son so gently interact with the new baby. Life with two children was chaotic and exhausting, and more wonderful than either Samuel or Lily could have imagined. Their small house rang with laughter and crying and the thousand small noises of family life. Samuel continued his scouting work but turned down longer assignments, wanting to be home with his family as much as possible. Lily balanced caring for two children with her sewing work, often nursing Sarah while helping Thomas with his numbers and letters. As the years passed, Fort Bowie became more than just a place they lived. It became home, the first true home either of them had known in a long time. They watched Thomas grow from a toddler to a little boy who loved horses and wanted to be a cowboy like his daddy. They watched Sarah grow from a baby to a determined little girl who followed her brother everywhere and refused to be left out of any adventure. Samuel taught both children to ride, starting them young on gentle horses, instilling in them a love and respect for animals. Lily taught them to read and write, using the Bible and whatever books they could borrow, determined that her children would have education and opportunity. Together, Samuel and Lily built a family based on love and respect, and the hard-won knowledge of how precious life could be. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Samuel surprised Lily with something he had been saving for months to afford: a small piece of land just outside Fort Bowie, 20 acres with a stream running through it, and enough grazing for a modest herd of cattle or horses. "I thought maybe it was time we had our own place," Samuel said nervously as they stood on the land together, Thomas and Sarah playing nearby. "Nothing against the fort, but I want to build you a real home, Lily. I want our children to have land to call their own. What do you think?" Lily looked around at the wild, beautiful country stretching in every direction, at her husband standing beside her with hope in his eyes, at her children laughing in the Arizona sunshine. She thought about that frozen trail 6 years ago, about how close she had come to losing everything, about the miracle of Samuel finding her and choosing to stay. "I think it is perfect," she said, taking his hand. "I think you are perfect. Let us build our home, Samuel. Let us build our future right here." They broke ground on their house that spring, Samuel doing most of the construction himself with help from friends at the fort on their days off. It was slow work fitting it around his scouting duties, but Samuel approached it with the same steady determination he brought to everything else. Lily helped when she could, holding boards steady while Samuel hammered, mixing mortar, keeping the children entertained and out of danger. By late summer, the house was habitable, 4 rooms built of adobe brick, with a wooden roof and glass windows that had cost a small fortune. It was not fancy, but it was solid and weatherproof and entirely theirs. The day they moved in, Samuel carried Lily over the threshold while Thomas and Sarah cheered, making a ceremony of this new beginning. "Welcome home, Mrs. Brooks," Samuel said, setting Lily down gently. "Welcome home, Mr. Brooks," Lily replied, kissing him soundly while their children made exaggerated gagging noises. Life on their own land was different from life at the fort. There was more work and more responsibility, but there was also more freedom. Samuel reduced his scouting duties to part-time, spending more hours building their herd and working their land. Lily kept a garden that flourished under her careful attention, providing vegetables that supplemented their diet and could be sold at the fort for extra income. Thomas started attending the fort school when he turned 7, riding to and from the fort each day on his pony with a few other ranch children who lived in the area. Sarah would start in another 2 years, but for now, she stayed home with Lily, learning to cook and sew and tend the chickens they had acquired. On quiet evenings after the children were in bed, Samuel and Lily would sit on their porch and watch the sunset over their land. These were the moments Lily treasured most, the peaceful companionship of two people who had built something real together. "Do you ever regret it?" Samuel asked one such evening. "Giving up the possibility of city life, comfort, ease. I know this is not the life most women dream of." Lily reached over and took his hand, intertwining their fingers. "I do not regret a single moment," she said honestly. "This life, this family, you, Samuel, this is more than I ever dared to dream. You gave me back hope when I had none. You gave my son a father and me a partner. You built this home and this life with your own hands. How could I regret any of that? I love you," Samuel said simply. "More every day." "I love you too," Lily replied. "Thank you for finding me that day on the trail. Thank you for not riding past. Thank you for every day since." When Thomas turned 10 and Sarah 8, Lily discovered she was pregnant again, a surprise that delighted and terrified her in equal measure. She was 31 now, older than she had been with her previous pregnancies, and she worried about complications. But Samuel was as supportive as ever, and this time she had experience and resources to draw on. Their second daughter, Grace Ann Brooks, was born in the spring of 1889 during a thunderstorm that shook the adobe walls of their home. She came into the world screaming her displeasure at being wet and cold, and she maintained that fiery temperament as she grew. Where Sarah had been a relatively easy baby, Grace demanded attention and refused to be ignored. Thomas and Sarah both adored their baby sister, competing to hold her and help care for her. Samuel, now 34, felt his heart expand to include this third child with the same fierce love he felt for Thomas and Sarah. He marveled sometimes at how his life had turned out, how that one decision to stop on a frozen trail had changed everything. He had gone from a lonely drifter to a husband and father of 3, from a man with no roots to someone who had built a home and a legacy. As Grace grew from baby to toddler, the Brooks family settled into their life with the contentment of people who knew how fortunate they were. Their land prospered modestly, enough to provide security without making them wealthy. The children grew healthy and strong, full of life and mischief. Samuel's reputation as a reliable scout and honest man opened doors and opportunities, and he began to be consulted on matters beyond just Apache movements, his opinion valued by the fort commander and the growing civilian population around Fort Bowie. Lily's sewing business expanded as more families settled in the area, and she found satisfaction in her work and the independence it provided. She never forgot what it felt like to be helpless and abandoned, and she made sure to help other women who found themselves in difficult circumstances, offering work, advice, or just a sympathetic ear. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Samuel took Lily back to the hillside where he had proposed, leaving the children with Margaret for the evening. They sat watching the sunset just as they had a decade before, older now and marked by life but still deeply in love. 10 years, Lily mused, leaning against Samuel's chest. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, and sometimes it feels like just yesterday you found me on that trail. Best decision I ever made, stopping to investigate what Copper sensed, Samuel said. Changed my entire life. Changed mine too, Lily agreed. Saved it, really. I think about that sometimes, about how close Thomas and I came to dying, how different everything would be if you had ridden past. But I did not ride past, Samuel said firmly. I stopped and I found you, and I fell in love with you, and here we are. That is what matters. Here we are, Lily echoed, smiling, with 3 beautiful children and a home and a life we built together. Samuel, I am so happy. Are you happy? Happier than I ever imagined possible, Samuel said honestly. You gave me purpose, Lily. You gave me a reason to stop drifting and start building. You gave me a family, a home, a life worth living. I thank God every day for leading me to you. They kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon, 2 people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built something beautiful from that chance encounter. The Arizona Territory stretched around them, still wild and dangerous and unforgiving, but they had carved out their place in it through determination and love. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the milestones of their growing children. Thomas, influenced by Samuel's example, decided he wanted to be a veterinarian, a new profession that was gaining recognition in the West as ranchers realized the value of proper animal care. Samuel supported this dream, saving money to send Thomas to school in Tucson when he was old enough, proud of his son's ambition and intelligence. Sarah surprised everyone by showing a talent for music, teaching herself to play the battered piano in the fort chapel until the chaplain gave her regular lessons. She dreamed of becoming a music teacher someday, and Lily encouraged this, remembering her own girlhood dreams of being more than convention allowed. Grace, true to her fiery nature, declared at age 6 that she was going to be a cowboy like her daddy, and no amount of gentle correction about gender roles could dissuade her. Samuel simply smiled and taught her to rope and ride alongside her siblings, figuring the world was changing fast enough that maybe by the time Grace grew up, women cowboys would not be such an impossibility. When Thomas was 16, he sat down with Samuel one evening after dinner, his expression serious. "Pa," he said, and Samuel's heart swelled at the title Thomas had started using somewhere around age 5 and never stopped. "Pa, I need to ask you something." "Anything, son," Samuel said, setting down the harness he had been mending. "Ma told me once that you are not my biological father," Thomas said carefully. "That my birth father died before I was born, and you found us on a trail and saved our lives. Is that true?" Samuel's throat tightened. He and Lily had always planned to tell Thomas the truth when he was old enough to understand, but somehow the right moment had never seemed to come. "Yes," he said quietly, "that is true. Your birth father was Thomas Lancaster, a good man by all accounts, and he died in a mining accident before you were born. I found you and your mother when you were just a day old, brought you both to safety, and eventually married your mother. But Thomas, I need you to know something important." Samuel leaned forward, his eyes locked on his son's. Biology does not make a father. Love does. Commitment does. Showing up every day and doing the work makes a father. I have loved you since the moment I first held you in that line shack, and I have been proud to call you my son every day since. If you want to honor your birth father's memory, I support that completely. But please know that you are my son in every way that matters, and nothing will ever change that. Thomas's eyes were wet with tears. You are my father, he said fiercely. You are my pa, the man who taught me to ride and read and be a good person. I just needed to know the truth, needed to understand my history. But pa, you are my father. That has never been in question. They embraced, both men crying unashamedly, and when Lily appeared in the doorway, she was crying too, moved by the love between her husband and her firstborn son. As Thomas prepared to leave for school in Tucson, the family gathered to see him off. It was 1895, and the Wild West was slowly transforming into something more civilized, though plenty of wildness remained. Thomas hugged each of his sisters, promising to write regularly, then turned to his parents. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion, for everything, for giving me a life, an education, a family. I will make you proud. You already have, Samuel said, clapping his son on the shoulder. You already have. Lily kissed her son's cheek, tears streaming down her face. Study hard, stay safe, and come home to visit when you can. We love you so much. They watched Thomas ride away toward his future, and Samuel put his arm around Lily's waist, pulling her close. We did good with that one, he said softly. We did good with all of them, Lily replied, watching her daughters waving goodbye to their brother. We built something beautiful, Samuel. Against all odds, we built something that will last. Life continued at the Brooks Ranch, quieter with Thomas gone, but still full and rich. Sarah began teaching piano to children at the fort, earning her own money and gaining confidence. Grace, at 12, could outride and outrope boys twice her age, and she worked alongside Samuel on the ranch with pride and skill. Lily continued her sewing and had begun writing down recipes and household tips, thinking she might someday compile them into a book for her daughters and their future daughters. Samuel, now 45, had gray threading through his hair and lines around his eyes, but he was still strong and capable, still devoted to his family and his land. He had cut back on scouting entirely, focusing on the ranch and spending time with his family. On Sundays, they would all ride into Fort Bowie for services, then have dinner with Margaret and her family, maintaining those connections that had been so important in their early days. One evening in late summer of 1897, Samuel and Lily sat on their porch as they had done countless times over the years. Grace was in bed, exhausted from a day of ranch work, and Sarah was inside practicing piano. The sun was setting in its usual spectacular display, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Do you remember what today is? Lily asked suddenly. Samuel thought for a moment. Then his eyes widened. 16 years, he said. 16 years since I found you on that trail. 16 years, Lily echoed. Sometimes I still dream about that night, about the cold and the fear and thinking I was going to die. But then I wake up and you are beside me, and our daughters are sleeping in their rooms, and Thomas is off making something of himself, and I realize that nightmare turned into the most beautiful life I could have imagined. I think about it too, Samuel admitted. I think about how easily I could have missed you, could have ridden past in the dark or taken a different trail entirely. One different decision, one small change, and none of this would exist. It makes me believe in fate, I think, or providence, something larger than ourselves that brought us together. I believe in second chances, Lily said. I believe that even when everything seems lost, there is still hope. You were my second chance. Samuel, you gave me back my life, gave me love when I thought I would never feel it again, gave my son a father and my daughters a life of security and happiness. You are my miracle. Samuel took her hand, bringing it to his lips. You are mine too, Lily Brooks. Every single day, you are my miracle. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, two people who had found each other in the most desperate of circumstances and built a lifetime of love from that frozen beginning. Around them, their ranch hummed with life, horses in the corral, chickens roosting for the night, their daughters safe inside. It was a simple life by some standards, but it was theirs, built with their own hands and hearts, a testament to the power of compassion and the enduring strength of love. When Thomas came home from Tucson 2 years later with his veterinary credentials and a pretty young wife named Emma, the Brooks family celebrated with a joy that came from knowing how precious family connections truly were. When Sarah married a music professor from Tucson and moved there to open her own music school, Samuel and Lily helped her pack with pride and bittersweet tears. When Grace announced at 18 that she was going to start a horse breeding business on the ranch property, Samuel built her a new barn, and Lily sewed her daughter's first business ledger with loving hands. The grandchildren started arriving in 1902, first Thomas and Emma's son, named Samuel Thomas Brooks, in honor of both his grandfather and the man who had been a father to Thomas. Then Sarah's twin daughters, musical and bright. Then Grace's son and daughter, born just a year apart and already showing signs of their mother's fierce independence. Samuel and Lily embraced grandparenthood with the same devotion they had brought to parenthood. Their house, expanded over the years to accommodate family gatherings, rang with the laughter and chaos of grandchildren during visits. Samuel taught his grandchildren to ride just as he had taught his children, while Lily told them stories and taught them to bake bread and preserve fruit. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1912, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Three children, three children-in-law, and five grandchildren filled the house and yard with noise and joy. Samuel and Lily, now in their 50s, looked around at the family they had created and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "Speech!" Thomas called out during dinner, and the entire family took up the chant until Samuel stood, holding up his hands for quiet. "I am not much of a speech maker," Samuel began, and his family laughed because they all knew this was true. "But I want to say something about what this family means to me. 31 years ago, I was a lonely cowboy drifting from job to job with no roots and no future beyond the next town. Then I found a woman and her newborn son on a frozen trail, and everything changed. That woman became my wife. That son became mine in every way that matters, and together we built this." He gestured around at the gathered family. "We built love and legacy and a future that extends beyond ourselves. So on this anniversary, I do not just want to celebrate 30 years of marriage. I want to celebrate every decision that brought us here, every challenge we overcame, every moment of joy we shared. Lily, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. And all of you, our children and grandchildren, you are the proof that love can create miracles." There was not a dry eye in the room when Samuel finished. Lily stood and kissed him, and their children and grandchildren applauded. Thomas raised his glass in a toast to Ma and Pa, who showed us what real love looks like and built a family on a foundation of compassion, courage, and commitment. May we all be as fortunate in our lives as they have been in theirs. "Hear, hear!" the family chorused, glasses clinking together in celebration. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Samuel and Lily walked out to their porch one last time. It had become their ritual, this quiet moment together under the stars, and they treasured it as much in their 50s as they had in their 20s. 30 years, Samuel said, shaking his head in wonder. "How did we get so lucky, Lily?" "Not luck," Lily said firmly. "Love, choice, commitment. You chose to stop on that trail when you could have ridden past. You chose to care for us when you could have left us at the fort and disappeared. You chose to stay and build a life with me when you could have returned to your drifting ways. Those choices created this family, Samuel. Your choices, my choices, all the little decisions we made along the way to love each other well." I would make every choice the same way again, Samuel said. Every single one. Me too, Lily agreed, leaning her head on his shoulder. Me too. They stood together in the darkness, surrounded by the land they had tamed and the family they had built. The Arizona Territory had changed dramatically since that frozen night in 1881 when Samuel had found Lily on the trail. Arizona had achieved statehood just that year, in 1912, marking the end of the territorial period and the beginning of a new era. But some things remained constant: the vast sky full of stars, the harsh beauty of the desert, and the enduring power of love to transform lives. Samuel thought about the young cowboy he had been, riding alone through the wilderness with nothing but his horse and his rifle, believing that freedom and solitude were all he needed. He thought about how wrong he had been, how empty that life had actually felt once he discovered what he had been missing. And he thought about the terrified young woman he had found in the snow, fighting death itself to protect her newborn son, and how she had become the center of his entire world. "What are you thinking about?" Lily asked softly, sensing his reflective mood. "About how one moment can change everything," Samuel said. "About how finding you was the beginning of my real life. Everything before was just preparation. About how grateful I am that Copper stopped that morning and made me investigate. About how every challenge we faced, every hardship we overcame, was worth it because it brought us here." "I think about that too," Lily said. "I think about how I prayed for someone to find us before it was too late, and you appeared like an answer to that prayer. I think about how you could have been anyone, but instead, you were exactly the man I needed, the man I would come to love more than I ever thought possible. I think about how we built this entire family from that single moment of compassion and connection." They were quiet for a while, just standing together under the stars, and then Samuel said something he had never told Lily before, something he had kept locked in his heart for 31 years. "When I first found you on that trail, when I saw you lying there with Thomas in your arms, I thought you were dead," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "For just a moment, before I checked for a pulse, I thought I was too late. And even though I did not know you, even though you were a stranger, I felt this crushing grief, this sense that something precious had been lost. And when I found you were alive, when I felt that faint heartbeat under my fingers, I promised myself I would do everything in my power to keep you alive. I did not know then that I was falling in love with you. I just knew that you mattered, that your life mattered, that your son deserved a chance to know his mother. But looking back now, I think maybe I did love you from that very first moment. Maybe my heart recognized yours before my head caught up." Lily was crying, tears streaming silently down her face. "I remember when I first opened my eyes in the line shack," she said. "I remember seeing your face, seeing the kindness in your eyes, hearing your voice telling me I was safe. And I remember thinking that you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, not because of your features, but because of the goodness shining from you. I was too weak and too scared to process it then, but later, when I was stronger, I realized that I trusted you completely from that very first moment. I put my life and my son's life in your hands without question, and you never once gave me reason to regret that trust. That is when I knew I loved you, Samuel. When I realized that trust and love were the same thing, at least between us." They held each other on that porch, two people who had survived tragedy and hardship to find something rare and precious. Their love story had begun in the worst possible circumstances, in cold and blood and desperation. But it had grown into something beautiful, something that had created family and legacy and enduring joy. The years continued to pass as they always do. Samuel and Lily grew older, their hair turning white, their bodies slowing, but their love never diminished. They watched their grandchildren grow and start families of their own, creating a fourth generation of Brooks descendants. Thomas took over the veterinary practice in Fort Bowie and became one of the most respected animal doctors in southern Arizona. Sarah's music school in Tucson flourished, training dozens of students who went on to become teachers and performers themselves. Grace's horse breeding business became legendary throughout the territory, supplying quality stock to ranches across the Southwest. When Samuel turned 70 in 1925, the family gathered once again at the ranch for a celebration. The house that Samuel had built with his own hands nearly 40 years earlier was showing its age, but it was still solid, still standing, still the heart of the Brooks family. Samuel's health had been declining over the past year. A weak heart, the doctor said, and everyone knew this might be the last time they would all be together while he was still strong enough to enjoy it. During the party, Samuel pulled Thomas aside. His firstborn son was now 44 years old, a successful man with children of his own, but to Samuel, he would always be the tiny infant he had first held in that frozen line shack so many years ago. "I want you to know something," Samuel said, his voice weaker than it used to be, but still firm. "Being your father has been one of the greatest honors of my life. I did not give you life, but you gave me purpose and meaning and a reason to be better than I was. You made me into a father, Thomas, and that changed everything." Thomas was crying openly, not caring who saw. "You saved my life, Pa," he said. "You and Ma both. Without you, I would not exist. Everything I am, everything I have accomplished, I owe to you and the choice you made to stop on that trail." "We saved each other," Samuel said, pulling his son into an embrace. "That is what family does. We save each other." Samuel lived for 3 more years, long enough to meet 2 more great-grandchildren and to celebrate 47 years of marriage to Lily. When he died peacefully in his sleep on a warm spring night in 1928, with Lily beside him holding his hand, the entire region mourned the loss of a good man. The funeral brought people from all over southern Arizona, ranchers Samuel had worked with, soldiers he had scouted for, families Lily had helped over the years, students Sarah had taught, clients of Thomas's veterinary practice, people who had bought horses from Grace. The line to pay respects stretched out the door of the Fort Chapel and down the street. Lily, now 70, stood dry-eyed through the service, her children and grandchildren surrounding her with love and support. She did not cry because she knew Samuel would not have wanted tears. He had lived a full life, a good life, and he had died knowing he was loved. What more could anyone ask for? After the burial in the small cemetery near Fort Bowie, Lily returned to the ranch alone. Her children had wanted her to stay with one of them, but she refused gently. She needed to be in the home Samuel had built, needed to feel his presence in the walls and floors and the porch where they had spent so many evenings together. That night, she sat on the porch and looked up at the stars, and she talked to Samuel as if he were still beside her. "We did it," she said softly. "We built a life and a family and a legacy. Our children are thriving. Our grandchildren are growing strong, and our great-grandchildren are just beginning their stories. Everything we dreamed of during those early days, we accomplished. And Samuel, my love, it was all because you stopped, because you chose compassion over convenience, because you saw a stranger in need and made her your responsibility, and then your partner, and then your whole world. I loved you from the line shack to the end, and I will love you beyond the end. Wait for me, wherever you are. Wait for me. And when my time comes, we will sit together under the stars again, just like we always did." Lily lived for another 12 years, dying peacefully at age 82 in 1940. She spent those years surrounded by family, watching her grandchildren marry and her great-grandchildren grow. She wrote down the story of how Samuel had found her on that frozen trail, wanting future generations to know where they came from, to understand the love and sacrifice that had built their family. She recorded Samuel's scouting stories and her own memories of pioneer life, creating a record of a time that was quickly fading into history. When she died, Lily was buried beside Samuel in the Fort Bowie Cemetery, their graves marked with simple headstones that bore their names, dates, and a single inscription, together forever, as we were always meant to be. The Brooks Ranch continued to operate for another generation, run by Grace and eventually by her children. The house Samuel had built stood for decades more, sheltering generations of his descendants before finally being replaced by a modern structure in the 1960s. But the family never forgot their history. Thomas's written account of finding Lily on the trail and Lily's own memoir of their life together were passed down through the generations, treasured family documents that reminded every Brooks descendant where they came from. The story became family legend. The cowboy who found a dying woman and her newborn son in the snow brought them to warmth and safety and ended up finding his own salvation in the process. It was a story of compassion and courage, of second chances and enduring love, of two people who found each other in the worst of circumstances and built something beautiful that lasted far beyond their own lifetimes. And if you visit the small cemetery near what used to be Fort Bowie, now a historic site preserved by the National Park Service, you can still find their graves side by side. Samuel Brooks, 1855–1928, and Lily Brooks, 1858–1940. Together forever, their love story carved into stone and family memory, a testament to the power of one simple choice to stop and help a stranger in need. Their descendants spread across Arizona and beyond, carrying with them the values Samuel and Lily had instilled: compassion for those in need, courage in the face of hardship, commitment to family, and the understanding that love, real love, requires both choice and sacrifice. The Brooks family tree grew wide and strong, branching into new states and new professions, but they all traced their roots back to that frozen trail in 1881, where a cowboy named Samuel Brooks made the decision to stop, and in doing so, changed countless lives, including his own. The Wild West that Samuel and Lily knew disappeared into history, replaced by cities and highways and modern conveniences, but some things remained constant across the generations. Love still mattered. Family still mattered. Compassion still mattered. And every Brooks descendant grew up knowing the story of their great, great, or great, great, great grandparents who had found each other in the snow and built a legacy of love that would outlast them all. It was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth passing down through the ages, a reminder that even in the darkest, coldest, most desperate moments, hope could arrive on horseback, bringing warmth and love and the promise of a better tomorrow.